Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with DrCybersecurity. And our first guest today comes to us all the way from Australia, Jacqueline Jane. Say hello, please.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, everywhere where you are. It's very early here for me, down under. I'm in Adelaide, Australia. It's wonderful to be with you.
Wow, that is absolutely amazing. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, my name is Jacqueline Jane. A lot of people call me JJ. It's a lot easier. And I work for Know4 as their security awareness advocate for the APAC region. And Know4 are the world's most popular integrated security awareness and training simulated phishing platform. A bit to get
Ah,
around, but we do the training piece and we do the simulation for social engineering. We help tens of thousands of organisations manage the problem of social engineering. At the moment, I think we're up to nearly over 32,000 clients with millions of users that sit within that. We were founded in 2010. Our head office is in Florida. I was their first Australian employee last year, which was just an honour in itself. And we opened our Australian office last year in Melbourne. Which is going really well. As an organisation, we're close to our 1,000th employee, which is really exciting. And I believe we're still at the 50% women at that Know4, which is
oh,
just,
wonderful.
I know.
Congratulations. That is wonderful.
It is, it's lovely, because there's a big movement around the women in cyber and the diversity around cyber. So it's really great to be working for an organisation like that. So a bit about me. I've had over 20 years experience as a conduit between people and tech. So talking to the technical people about how to engage people and understand their challenges in this world, and talking to the people about what they need to actually know about tech. Because I think there's an issue there about that translation of need and even just the nature of what we do. So that's been a lot of fun. I've worked in HR, people and environment, or people and culture. It's called something different everywhere, and IT. And I've worked in different sectors. So I've done finance, travel, higher education, advertising, sales, marketing. So I have a very good grasp of what's going on in the different business units and their challenges. So I've done my programs of work. So one piece led me to what I do now, but I've done a lot of user experience, facilitation, change management, ideation, learning and development. And a few years back, I was tasked with creating a cybersecurity awareness program. And I thought this is going to be really interesting, and it was. It led me to Know4. I successfully created a culture of cybersecurity in a relatively large organisation, and I realised there was a gap in the market. There was, I find, and I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this, Mansur, is there seems to be a disconnect that cyber only talk to cyber. Do you
No,
find that?
actually, I was looking at your work. I saw that you were one of the few people that already thinks of the concept of the human firewall, and that's actually one of the research areas that I looked into when I was doing my doctoral dissertation.
Right.
So there is a segment on that. I'm a firm believer on that, so I'm sure that we will have a good conversation around that. So welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you.
It's absolutely fantastic what you're doing. So let's go into some of your questions and topics that you want to talk about today.
Well, the first thing I would like to know is I'm on a quest to create those human firewalls and start the ball rolling on the looking at a nation. So if you think about Australia, as any country, we've got 25 odd million people here, and some people laughed at me when I said it, but I'm actually wanting to create a culture of cybersecurity as a nation. As we all know how to deal with our skin, with slip, slop, slap of keeping ourselves from getting sunburnt. We all know that here, from children all the way up to the elderly. So what's your thoughts on how would you go about approaching the government, the people in power who have the money to say, everybody needs to know about cybersecurity, not just from a industry perspective of systems and infrastructure, but from the people point of view? I'd love to know your
Yes,
thoughts on that.
absolutely. So if you have read any of my work, you will probably see that I view cybersecurity as the business discipline of the future and the current world,
Yeah.
because we were in the third industrial revolution. That era is gone. So all of the MBA schools, the business schools, all of those programs were designed for a different era. Most of those programs were designed in the 1970s, and they have
Yep.
not really changed. One of the key things during that era was the focus on process. So you will see a lot of people have been focused on the process, because we were in that assembly line era. The third industrial revolution was pretty much for that assembly line, reduction of errors, and process, process, process. So we did a lot of management literature. Well, what happened is that even though around the 2010, around that, management started to become a negative word. So what I noticed was that a lot of the literature from that world, the management world, was just rebranded, and the
Mm-hmm.
word management was replaced with leadership. So that has created significant confusion in the marketplace.
Agreed.
And that is one of the key things that has to be changed. So for example, how would you build a complete nation around cybersecurity? Well, see,
Yep.
cybersecurity to me is nothing more than people-powered perpetual innovation, and that is why my focus has always been on the people. Now, what are some of the key elements of that culture? Leadership, teamwork, perseverance, focus on the problem solution, not on the problem, right? Because too many people are focused on the problem, and they're often, even when they're making a presentation, will on a 1 hour presentation, they will spend 45 minutes talking about the problem, that
Yep.
there's all this hacking going on and all these problems and all this. And I'm like, we already know that. Talk about solutions, all right? Then integrity in purpose. What does that mean? That basically means that if I'm assigned a job to do, I better be doing that job to the best of my abilities, whether people are looking at me or not. I should not have to be watched over. So that is ethics and integrity and purpose. Continuous improvement. And then the final thing is the harmonious coexistence. So if you think about my whole brand, that giant crested swallow, which I have embraced as my personal brand. Why did I embrace that? Because that swallow, that harmonious coexistence, the way that giant swallow coexists is that because it's in the desert, this sparse rainfall, it will fall down if it doesn't grow its roots deep. However, in the desert, because there's so sparse rainfall, if it grows its roots deep, it won't get the water. So what it does, it is grows its roots sideways. But when it grows it sideways, now it's going to fall because it's very shallow root. So what it does is intertwines its roots with all the other giant swallows around itself. To me, that is that community, the harmonious. I mean, we're stronger together. This particular thing has to be fostered as a national culture. We already did this in organizations. So every organization that I have led, this was the culture of the organization. I've talked to many CEOs. This was the culture that they built in those amazing companies. And there are still many companies that are doing this. So if a company can do this, if an organization can do this, I bet you an entire nation could do it too. So that would be the way.
Yeah, that's very interesting and very true. That talking about roots that intertwine and find a way, it's very akin to human nature.
Mm-hmm.
People will find the path of least resistance to do whatever they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I've found most fascinating to bring myself to the world of cybersecurity, because people always will say, well, what's your background?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not technical. My background is not technical.
Mm-hmm.
My background is in people, and I understand why they do what they do and how to engage with them, how to take them on the journey, and get them to understand those change management principles. I won't go into them all, but have a look there. There's a lot of similarities when you do look at that framework of change management. But I believe that, because part of my quest, Mansur, is to bring together IT and bring together HR to collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
The tech side
And as a
and
matter
the
of fact,
people
HR
side.
shouldn't even be called HR. So that's another,
No, they shouldn't.
because humans are not resources. That's a very
Correct.
bad term.
Correct. We tend
We
to
should,
call it
we
people and
could call it
culture.
human capital is what I like to call them, because
Yeah,
that's what they are. Because humans are the intellectual capital of any organization. And so therefore, when we
exactly.
think of them as resources, there is this culture of, hey, we bring in the resource and we discard them.
Hmm.
Well, and that is the other thing that has resulted in reduced innovation. So if you look at the innovation research, innovation even in the United States today is half of what it used to be in 1972. That is a research that was done by the London School of Economics. There was a big scholar over there that did that research. And I was actually blown away. And I looked at some of the statistics myself when I did my own verification of that. And I said, wow, that is true, because people are not innovating, because if you keep discarding them every 2 or 3 years, why would they innovate?
Yeah. Tell me, what do you think about, if you think about the IT person, so the cybersecurity group or the CISO, the CSO, whatever we call them around the world, because it's all
Mm-hmm.
different.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, in your opinion, have a conversation, and what would the key messages be for them to understand if cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility? How do you get them to realize they need to bring in that people element of their organization?
Well, first of all, they need to understand what cybersecurity is. So the very first thing is ask them to define what is cybersecurity, and most of them will fail right there.
Yep.
Some of them will even spell it incorrectly. So we have to teach them what cybersecurity is. And this is why the first chapter of my book, I pretty much created a video with slides and everything and put it up on YouTube, and it's free for anyone to use. Many schools, colleges, universities are using that chapter. Even if they just use that chapter, they will at least understand what cybersecurity is. Now, of course, the rest of the book talks about a whole bunch of other things, but that fundamental knowledge is important, because they need to understand that cybersecurity is more about people than
Yep.
it is about technology. Because if the people aren't there, who's going to choose your technology? If the people aren't there, who's going to configure your technology? And if the
Yep.
people aren't there, who's going to train the people to use it?
And the interesting thing is as well, we know that anywhere between 70 to 90% of successful data breaches are because someone used their little finger and clicked. They engaged with an email that was malicious.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it fascinating in every study, every report, every wonderful, because there's so many amazing surveys done out there. The
Yeah.
data says we know that this high percentage is because of a person. However, the percentage of so we're going to train them better is nowhere near it. It's around the 20-30% mark for a priority. It makes no sense to me. Have you ever noticed that in
Yeah.
research papers?
Yes. And the reason that happens is because they are doing cybersecurity awareness training. So that is
Yeah.
why, again, the model is important, because cybersecurity awareness training was something that began in the 1990s. So that was the
Yes.
original John McCumber model, the InfoSec model. Well, that model was replaced in 2001 by the information assurance model, which talks about not awareness anymore. It was now beginning to talk about culture and people, that you have to govern the people. And then when
Yep.
I put in my model in 2014, where I talked about that, okay, you don't even do cybersecurity without a mission. What are you doing it for? And then cybersecurity is not like security alone, because too many people are equating it with security. So that's part of the problem. And
Yeah.
they're teaching them how to be secure. Don't teach them how to be secure. Teach them how to be productive, because every person uses different data, different information. And so all they need to know is how to get their job done better. So do it as a productivity training. That's the
Mm.
way I did it. I did this at a nuclear power plant. I did it as a healthcare organization. I did it in education. So I was a CIO for 12 years. So what did I
Yeah.
do? I spent most of my time training people on their job, not cybersecurity training. I never did that. I most of the time never used the word security, never used the word cybersecurity. I would use data safety, information safety, patient safety, things
Yep.
like that, things that they were already doing. So that's the biggest thing. So part of the problem is that I think that a lot of the people that are in the positions came up through certain ranks, but they never updated their skills. I run into people like that all the time.
It's really,
25 years, sorry?
so that's an interesting point. I often think about the people who are making the decisions and what path they took to get there, what training they experienced to get there.
Yes.
It's all very, very different now. And people like myself who are, the goal is to get cut through and find a different language to talk. Some people get it straight away, others it takes a little bit longer, but know before, I don't know the math behind it or the psychology of every single thing. But what we've found is if you find out first someone's knowledge and then you test them with a phishing test, that's an easy one to spot. And we find that at least 37% of people will fall for that test. It's usually a change your password. Then we train them, but we train them not like the sit down for an hour, watch this PowerPoint and you're done. We look at it very differently. It's ongoing, it's relevant, it's Netflix style training, it's engaging, it's actually quite funny, but it gets the message across. Like you said, it's not talking about cybersecurity, it's the world. And they understand it. Then we test again and it's amazing, it drops by nearly up to 14%.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Anyway, it was fantastic chatting with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming from all the way from Australia. And now it is time for me to bring in my second guest, Dr. Zamira Simkin. Thank you again.
Hi there. My name is Dr. Zamira Simkins. I'm a chair of the Business Administration Department at Stevenson University. I'm also a professor of finance and an economist by training. And I'm really happy to join Dr. Hasib today in the Conversations with DrCybersecurity series.
Wonderful. Welcome, Zamira. So what did you want to talk about?
Well,
just don't talk about accounting and finance, okay?
Since both you and I just finished a pretty challenging semester where we had to transition to remote instruction literally on a moment's notice, I thought we would talk about the challenges and the success stories that came out from that experience, as well as reflect on what we learned from it and what we can deduce as to potential future business trends that will emerge in the post-COVID world. Hopefully that will be coming soon.
Great. No, actually, one of the things about the experience was that for me, one of the things in the past, if I was doing 100% online class, people knew it was 100% online class when they joined. So what was fascinating for me was that the transition from traditional face-to-face to online, 100% online, at first it seemed like the students were in major shock, which is expected. But I also felt like the attitude of the professor makes a huge difference. Because one of the things is that I kept telling them, I said, hey, let's just have fun. Because I kept telling them stories about my own life. I said, look, I actually went through a war. In 9 months, I could not go to school. I could not do anything. But one of the things that I didn't do is I never stopped learning during that time. And we didn't even have technology that we have today. So I told them, I said, focus on your own career's own success. So it took a little while. And I also told them, let's have fun. So I would teach them how to do virtual backgrounds and things like that. And they actually, some of them came with funny masks and all that. I'm like, this is all fine. So for me, that was part of it. And then of course we talked. I made them, if they weren't asking me questions, I would ask them questions the same way that I would do in a traditional classroom. So it was never, I was not, see, the professor, I think, is the leader that kind of sets the tone. So I feel like, now, if I start complaining, then we're dead, right? So I was never complaining. I was like, let's have fun and let's do funny virtual backgrounds and things like that. And one day I actually had the business school photo, but as my virtual background, I said, let's imagine we're having a class outside. What about you? Those are things that I did. I thought that, well, what proved to me that that worked is the student evaluation. See, in that class, I was thinking I would get a bad student evaluation because half of the class was 100% online. But I got comments from the students, and the overall evaluation was 4.91 out of 5, which is among the highest that I've ever received. Because generally it's 4.75 and up. But 4.91 in my very first undergraduate class at Stevenson, not bad.
And I think for me, some of the biggest challenges were not so much transitioning. For myself, I know students had difficulty. The engagement piece certainly was different than in the classroom. And as much as higher education was moving to the online instructions and programs predominantly in the graduate programs and so forth, I think this experience made everybody realize how much they miss the traditional face-to-face classrooms. So that was one, it was one realization. In terms of the sort of challenges to me personally as a professional, I think having some privacy concerns as well as cybersecurity concerns were always on top of my mind, because as we transitioned, there were so many articles about Zoom sessions being broken into by hackers and distorted and so forth. So I was very cognizant of what information I was sharing, for example, on the screen during the sessions, because you never know what happens. So that was in the back of my mind. But at the same time, one of the biggest success stories I think I have experienced this semester was we had a team of students led by Dr. Mark Arvisa.
Yes, I saw that.
Participated in Environment Cup case study supply chain competition. And they took the first place in the competition. And the company that presented the case this year was Pandora, a jewelry manufacturer. And so their job was to identify some of the manufacturing challenges they were facing and recommend solutions. And so this was a real world case, and they helped solve a real business problem. I have observed their presentation. I have watched the company's comments and feedback to their presentation, and they have done a really magnificent job. So as much as the COVID and remote instructional period was challenging, I think this experience has taught them that they can still work on cases or problems, work in teams, and present it all virtually or through a video conferencing, which is a very good skill to have as they enter into the workforce in the future, because that is one of the predominant feedbacks we've been getting from industry professionals on our advisory board. They don't
Actually,
do
come to think of it, the video presence, even learning that art of having a compelling video presence would be a very important aspect of success, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so taking away from that, I told the group of students that they have learned a very valuable lesson and really have developed a unique skill set that will help them in the workforce in the future, because more and more of it tends to be remote or tends to be via video conferencing, just like we're doing right now. And so as I was thinking about the business trends that would emerge in this post-COVID business world, I was wondering what your thoughts are. I kind of see 3 potential major trends. One is workforce will become increasingly mobile, but not in a normal sense of labor mobility as economists are used to, where people move from country to country based on their skill sets, but it will be more in technology platforms, because with the digital transformation we're experiencing, the use of remote video conferencing, we will probably see people essentially commuting to work from foreign countries to companies in other countries. So that's going to really remove the national boundaries.
Absolutely. So this is absolutely correct. I think that this is the time when a lot of the companies that are still led by manager types is really going to have a hard time, because the manager types, for whatever reason, believe that people come to work and you have to watch that they clock in the number of hours. But you see, the workforce has changed. I think for as long as, because I was in technology, as far back as I can remember, my personal life and my work life was always intertwined, always. Because I've always worked in 24/7 kinds of environments where I had to support 24/7. And even when I went to academia, I found out that even that is almost 24/7, because a lot of my work happens in the evenings and things like that. And so I think that a lot of other companies will start to realize that, hey, wait a minute, we're actually very productive. And they will also realize that they have more choices in terms of faculty. So for example, when I was running a 100% online graduate program and I have to hire 60 faculty, no problem. They could be anywhere. They could teach. And so I was able to get the best faculty that I wanted, that met the cultural requirements that I wanted, because I wanted not just domain knowledge, I wanted the passion. I wanted them to be truly like looking out for the student and help them. I didn't want them to be judges. I wanted them to be coaches. In other words, let the student submit something, take that as the first attempt, and then help them get to that final stage, because it was all competency-based and project-based. So our job should be to help. So I think that is going to happen. I think people are going to realize that you can actually make a living by having multiple sources of income. So that is happening. I also feel like the people's use of technology is going to grow, because almost everybody is elevating their knowledge of technology. So you talked about the Zoom bombing and things like that. A lot of it had to do with how people were using it. Now, yes, Zoom did have some issues, and they did fix a lot of things. For example, one of the biggest things they fixed was that they didn't have the right encryption method, number one. Number two, a lot of their traffic was being routed through China. And that could result in surveillance of that communication by unwanted people. So absolutely, those things were fixed. So actually, they did a good job of fixing that thing. But for me as a technology strategist, I've never worried about that part, because the issue is often usage. So if you know how to use it, for example, the link to the meeting, I don't give that out except to known people. So I have an Eventbrite registration site. So for the general public that I don't know, because everybody's welcome to come to my show. Well, what they do is they sign up with the email address that has to be valid, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a little bit of control there. So I feel that's going to happen. And I also feel like as people realize that technology is the future, I think that a lot of the people who are in technology and the cybersecurity realm in particular, online learning, those kinds of people will become higher in demand. Because as you probably know, education is really, really far behind in the adoption of technology for education. So it doesn't matter whether we are traditionals or whatever, the use of technology has to be there. I know many faculty in many universities where the faculty member has never even logged into the learning management system. So that's a big problem. They don't even have a grade book online. So those kinds of things, I think that will be changing, and that will result in probably better education, because regardless of how you do it, those things have to be done.
And I really see how virtual reality could play a big role as we can effectively engage with each other with the use of virtual reality tools as if it's a real classroom.
Not only virtual reality, but even simple things like smaller videos. I'm assuming that a lot of people are now learning to make short videos. I know you are very good at that, but I know many people are doing it for the first time. They're being pushed to do this. Well, once they realize it's not that hard,
Yeah.
then they will start to do this, and then they can give lectures on Zoom, maybe record it, and make it a much more engaging experience for their students.
And I think the last trend I envision is we're going to have to consider the risks that are upcoming and try to factor them into how businesses create value. Value creation, I don't see will be solely centered on profits anymore. I think we're sort of experiencing a social change towards value of human welfare and just general human well-being. And so I see companies that are enveloping those principles, they will be successful and sustainable in the long run.
So
As
yeah, if
world
that happens, that would be amazing. If that happens, this is the one thing that I've been fighting for. Because what I've been fighting for is the compensation based upon contribution. Because what has been happening in the business world, as you know, people are not getting paid according to their contribution. They're basically getting paid according to their power. And that's not the right way. What that does is that skews this whole profit, what do you call it, distribution model, and ruins the economy. So some people are living at subsistence while others are living in such squalor that whether they consume or not doesn't make a difference to the economy.
There is a limit to how much you can consume, and that's what economists call the multiplier effect.
Yeah.
The richest doesn't need as much to support their subsistence as 10 or 50 times of what they would make. And so the multiplier just doesn't work the same way.
Right. And then the other thing is that we have no social safety net, which is now being revealed in a very, very stark reality way. The other thing that is being revealed is that too many businesses have no business continuity plan, right? They've been so focused on reducing expenses that they never plan for disasters. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, how does that make sense? So there was a lot of people that said, oh, my company is going out of business because of all this. And I'm thinking, okay, did you never plan for a pandemic or a bomb blast? I mean, I remember for all my years in whichever company I worked for, we always had a business continuity disaster recovery plan.
An emergency preparedness, just as simple.
Exactly. And some of it had to do with the absence of technology. What would we do if there would be no technology at all? Because I have worked for, say, healthcare organizations, right? I mean, patients have to be served because otherwise they will die. Even if there's no electricity and all that, we will have to do something. So, but it was fantastic catching up with you, Samira. It was wonderful for you to come on the show. Great to see you. And we'll catch up again. So I am now going to bring in Hiram Merchant. Hiram Merchant, welcome. You have to unmute yourself.
DrCybersecurity, how are you today?
Wonderful, wonderful. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. My name is Hiram Ronaldo Merchant Sr. I'm a senior IT manager in the United States Army, approaching 20 years of tenure in the Department of Defense. Of the 20 years, I have about 10 years of experience in cybersecurity and information assurance. Currently, I'm a graduate student with Western Governance.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes, indeed. I would not mention...
Very good school for competency-based education. I think they were one of the first that started that trend.
Absolutely, and it's really unique having coming from Ashford University, and I do have a degree in accounting. So I promise you, we will not talk about any accounting.
Yeah, don't talk about accounting.
We will not talk about that. Absolutely not. I will not do that to you. It's truly exciting. I'm excited to be here. I feel privileged to be here, and I thank you for having me.
No, you're welcome. It is absolutely wonderful to have you.
So,
And part of the reason I talk about the accounting, I actually did take accounting at college, and it
right.
was my worst subject. And that's when I realized
Yeah,
something else is out there for me.
it's unique in that it is one of those realms that we call the land of unicorns, uh, where we have our own terminologies, the way how we see things.
Yes,
So let's put a pin on accounting and let's
all
talk cybersecurity.
right. All right.
So I bought your book,
Mhm. Oh,
cybersecurity.
wonderful.
Yes, and I was keyed in on your topic. A human problem needs a human solution.
Ah.
So let's pivot from that.
Mhm.
And in my studies with Western governance, they spoke. There's a line that caught me,
Mhm.
and it said that humans are the weakest link in
Mhm.
cybersecurity.
Mhm. Mhm.
Why do you believe? And I think I mentioned this a couple of months ago on
Mhm.
LinkedIn. Why do you believe people don't take cybersecurity seriously until there's a loss?
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, because see, this is the problem that anybody who says humans are the weakest link actually do not understand humans, and they certainly don't understand cybersecurity.
Absolutely.
Because if you've read my book, you can see that the human problem requires a human solution. So, and that's why I've always said that it's a people-powered perpetual innovation discipline, and it's a business discipline.
Right.
And to me, people have always been my greatest strength. I've surrounded myself always with great people. And some people say, well, do you have to select all the smartest ones? No, everybody is smart already.
Right.
It's just that I have to find their passion. See, there somebody's. If I can unleash that passion, or I can hire the people with the right passion and the right job role,
Right.
then they will automatically shine. That's what happened to me. For me, my reasoning for leaving any job is if I stop having fun,
Mm-hmm.
that's the time to go. Because you probably read the last chapter of my book, where I talk about when life tells you to move on, you
Right.
listen, right?
Absolutely.
And you're going to get those cues from life. So for me, it has always been about the people, because think about who does innovation? People.
People.
So my people always gave me 150% because I kept them happy. The moment I keep them happy, what happens? Their brain is like firing on every cylinder. But the
Absolutely.
moment I keep them under a lot of stress
Yeah. They
and
they rebound.
vision
Mm-hmm.
or monitoring, so a lot of these companies, when they say that, okay, we have insider problems or the humans are the weakest links and I want to make sure I don't have any insider threats, well, when they create a police state, they have ruined innovation in their company.
Right. It's, yeah, and that is definitely true because in conversation you've heard of leaders that are micromanagers,
Mm-hmm.
theory X, theory Y leadership, and whereas leaders that empower their people, they
Yep.
flourish.
Yep.
And we see this in in COVID, where
Mm-hmm.
people are at home,
Yep.
however, people are productive,
Yep.
and you
Yep.
wonder why, right?
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
I believe I'm a true believer in that humans are our greatest asset. I,
Absolutely. So
I've
this is
learned
wonderful
that.
to hear
Mm-hmm.
you say that. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
yeah. So that was a cognitive dissonance when you were hearing that, right? That people are
Yes.
the weakest link, right?
Yes.
Right. Because being in the army, you probably know this, right? Your
Yep.
biggest assets are what?
The team,
All the people
people
around
around it.
you.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay.
Your team, right? The people that are on your side.
Yes. And some of the, I'll tell you, the experience in the military, it took some soul searching to walk away. But like you said, there's a time when you need to walk away and move on to greater things
Yes.
in life. So
Yes. Humans, this is the thing about pivoting, right? You never keep, the moment you feel like you're stagnating and that excitement is gone, it's just become a source of income, and we need sources of income, but we also need, humans need that excitement,
yes,
that innovation, that
the
firepower.
fulfillment in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So my next question, there's a lot of buzz on AI, machine learning, and Internet of Things. And I allude to this in another one of my LinkedIn posts where we talk about the lack of personnel, people securing, and I'm specifically talking about Internet of Things here. People securing their own personal networks. I received a text from my wife, and she told me, your son, Mr. Merchant, told me that the password that she created for something that they're working on was not complex enough. And he is only 9 years old. So that education at a young age, if we start that with our kids, I think we could nurture people that are cybersecurity minded. But with that said, how do you think we could cultivate that culture at home with our children and stuff like that?
Well, first of all, by taking care of them, and then basically having the relationship with them, right?
Right.
I had very strong relationships with my mother. So my mother was the first leader from whom I learned leadership. So having that relationship, it's too many people are forcing their children to be with babysitters all the time or with the school all the time, and they're not spending enough time with their children and developing the value. The whole thing that happens is the value transfer, right? You have a set of values. I would assume that you would want your children to embrace those values. And if you're not spending time with your children, where do they get their values? I see all these things that I talk about, the values that I talk about, I got them from my mother, and basically I have carried that throughout my entire life. And those values actually started as far back as I can remember is 4th grade. My earliest memory is actually in 4th grade, where I was able to see the fruits of earning a reputation for integrity. See, at school, even in 4th grade, I already had a reputation for telling the truth. And that reputation resulted in my word against my 4th grade teacher who was lying. She got fired because the principal believed me.
Wow.
Because I had that reputation for honesty already.
Right.
So I think that is important. I think we need to teach our children to have that reputation, and then the teamwork and all that, and friends. So another thing that I learned as a child is my mom told me to be friends with everybody. And if somebody was like not positive or didn't have the ethics, no need to mix with them. We didn't have to mix with everybody, but the people, but it is important to mix with friends and have lots of friends. And it is also important to help each other succeed. So one of the things that my mom taught me was that if I teach somebody to do something, it doesn't diminish my own knowledge. So I was good at math and certain things, and my friends were, I was also very good at English. So because I was in a different country and English was not the first language for most people, and I took it upon myself to teach my friends, and I would write copious notes and I would share them with my friends. But guess what? In return, they would teach me the subjects that I was weak in. Geography was one of my weaknesses. History was one of my weaknesses. But guess what? The 4 or 5 bunch of our friends We were always top in the class because we would help each other. We would make sure that we don't let each other down, right?
Right, right. Working together.
That is something that happens as a child, I think.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And my final question.
Okay.
So COVID, we know, has turned the entire globe upside down.
Mm-hmm.
And I can reflect on how things may be going in these healthcare organizations. At the speed of light, patient data is being transferred back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the healthcare organizations are at risk, and even from a cybersecurity standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
How can they mitigate? How can the cybersecurity professionals in healthcare organizations help mitigate these risks and potential vulnerabilities?
Healthcare. So healthcare, actually, you probably know that I worked in healthcare. My doctoral dissertation was in healthcare. So one of the biggest things that, and people are not going to like me to say this, but in healthcare, technology and cybersecurity is run by the chief financial officer in about 50% of the organizations. So that is the first nonsense that has to stop.
Right.
If you don't stop that, you're never going to get there, because a CFO's mentality is completely different.
Yep.
They are not thinking 5 years down the road, disaster recovery planning, all of that. Their whole thing is budgets, finance, and the accounting system is very obsolete. You probably know that.
Absolutely.
Because the human value of innovation is not reflected in the accounting system. In the accounting system, humans are treated as the biggest cost center, but the value production that they produce is not reflected anywhere.
Right.
However, you probably know, and I have seen this, right? Anytime I go to a university or a program, guess what? I attract hundreds and hundreds of students.
Mm-hmm.
That value production is not reflected in any place in the accounting system. So I am always seen as a cost center, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my income or my production is not according to my contribution. So I could bring in 1,000 students tomorrow. It would not make any difference in my salary. I would not get a bonus. I would not get anything. That has to stop.
Mm-hmm.
People's value is according to their production.
Right.
And that's the way capitalism always works.
Right.
Because then you have the incentive of producing.
Right. It's funny you say that, because, and I promised that I wouldn't step into accounting, but in our accounting textbook,
Mm-hmm.
it said that cash is king, and that's the mindset of CFOs. They're focused on income statements. They're focused on between the hashes, in
Yes,
between the
that
40.
whole role, the whole CFO role,
Mm-hmm.
is an anachronism in this modern time.
Right.
That role was created because we were having those financial issues and all kinds of games were being played. So they created an officer to sign off on the accounting statement and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Most CEOs are there already. So I don't believe that we need a CFO anymore. Maybe have an accountant, maybe have whatever, but get rid of that role and you will save a lot of money and you will have innovation, true innovation in any kind of company, not even, and some CEOs have actually done that. So I consult with CEOs, and many CEOs that I consulted this with, they started wondering, yeah, you're right. My CFO is actually sometimes telling me what I can do and what I cannot do. See, a CEO, what do they want to do? They want to grow the business. I want to do this. I want to do that. Right. And their CFO that they hired was constantly telling them no, without understanding.
Yeah. Restricting.
And the CFO is telling the CEO what to do and what not to do. That is crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So it has been absolutely wonderful to talk to you, Hiram, and we should continue the conversation because you sound like you're exactly the way I think also.
Oh yeah.
Especially with your accounting background,
yes.
I would love for you to come up with a brand new accounting system of the future. Please.
It's funny you say that, because, and I know it's funny you say that, because that is in my mind. How do we bring these two together and there's this synergy where we could create something new, and there's something that's innovative. So yes, we will be
It is
talking.
essential. A new
Yeah.
accounting system is absolutely necessary. So maybe you and Zamira, Dr. Zamira Simkin, can get together, because she has that background also. And that's another thing, is that we have this networking going on in this thing also, and we will do the networking after the show.
Right.
But now I'm going to bring in my final guest for this evening, Angela Sims. So please come on, introduce yourself and say hello.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, Dr. Hasib. My name is Angelina Sims. I am very happy to be here and be a part of your wonderful community. I am based just outside of Philadelphia in the suburbs, and I am a working parent. I attend Immaculata University. I am in the Information Systems program. When I chose that program, I was actually encouraged to jump right into cybersecurity, but I was very unsure of it. So I have a lot of things to take care of very soon. And I actually discovered you, Dr. Hasib, because I had a conversation with you before this show. I originally was a Toastmaster, and somehow, some way, I came across your profile because I don't know what combination I entered online. I was looking for a Toastmaster who was in cybersecurity, and I found you.
Oh, that is amazing.
I started following you and following your work, and I finally got the courage to request your friendship on LinkedIn, and kind of here we are now.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So you are actually going to be part of our Toastmasters Club? Is that what you were thinking?
I would like to thank you for inviting me as a guest a couple weeks ago to visit your club. I enjoy the format.
I would be honored to be your mentor should you choose me. If you come to our club, that's what we're doing. So I just got elected president of the club.
Congratulations.
And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to have a formal mentorship program for anybody that comes in. And anybody that comes in through me, I will personally mentor that person.
Okay, I am looking forward to it.
Because it actually helps you become proficient faster, I think.
Take you up on that.
Great, 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 great.
Yeah, so
what did you want to talk about today, Angelina? This is absolutely wonderful. That introduction was great.
Thank you. Well, as I followed you, like I said, on LinkedIn, I discovered your audiobook and I listened to it and I wrote the review.
Oh, right. You did write a review.
I was very fortunate for you to share it because it kind of prompted me to be a little more social and active online. And like you always say on your show, you know, you need to work on your brand. So you sharing my review kind of motivated me to be a little more active online.
Nice.
So I'm very fortunate for that. And with your book, I like the topics you talk about because you're about people, you're about technology, you're about business, and those are things I'm interested in. So I guess the first thing I want to touch on technology. Well, no, let's back up. Let's do education first.
All right.
So my first question for you would be, for someone who's new to studying cybersecurity and technology and looking to go to university, what would you encourage them to look for when selecting a program?
Well, I would recommend that you, first of all, interview the chairs of the program. I think the program chairs set the tone of any program. Just see how they run the program. Just ask them, how do you recruit your faculty, and ask them what is cybersecurity, right? Having read my book, you will immediately know whether the person actually understands cybersecurity or not. Unfortunately, there are many, many program chairs that do not understand cybersecurity that are running these kinds of programs. Many don't have the degrees in the field, so you would want to find out the qualifications. You would see their work, do Google searches on their name. What comes up? Did they publish? Did they write? Did they speak? So these things make a huge difference, because the program and the universities, that doesn't make that much of a difference.
Okay. So a little combination of technology and education, maybe more of a community focus. Since COVID, everyone's talking about COVID lately and technology. My son, he has autism, so since COVID happened, I am very hands-on with his technology software, and it's got me to thinking, like, what recommendations do you have for people who are using assistive technology, and how can they protect themselves with like smart software, smart homes? Like, where do you see that going in the future?
That is a perpetual, again, innovation issue, because you just have to keep figuring out what technology you're using, understand how to use it better. So for example, this conversation just came up with this whole Zoom, right? If I'm going to use Zoom, then I better understand how to better use that Zoom, and then how to configure, because as you probably know, every technology has a configuration issue, selection issue, and how I use it. And then with my links, how I give out the links. So that has an impact on security, right? So these are, so be more conscious about the technologies that you're using and become better, proficient user of those kinds of technology. So I think knowledge is the most important thing. And the more knowledgeable we are, because part of the problem is that the reason we don't secure, say, our home routers or home machines and things like that is because we often don't read enough about it. So one of the easiest ways to protect yourself is, how about using Chromebooks? As you probably know, Chromebooks are pretty secure, right? Viruses can't like get into a Chromebook, because the moment you reboot a Chrome, whatever might have happened during that session will just be blown away. So that is one of the things that I've recommended to a lot of people. A lot of people that don't really need, say, Windows or Mac or whatever, or all this software that comes with it, Chromebook works pretty well.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much for that. And I think we'll round out our questioning for the evening with, I noticed in your book, you mentioned about healthcare and the IT teams and the passwords and empowering the users in the department and the workforce. So say someone who happens to be in school for cybersecurity, who's just working with the quote unquote regular people, how can someone like that help work with the IT department and empower their coworkers to kind of release the reins and encourage everyone to kind of work together and not have to battle back and forth to call the help desk all the time to reset passwords and all those sorts of things?
Right. So this is you probably saw that in my book I talked about empowering the users. And in all the organizations where I was CIO, password resets and these kinds of things, as a matter of fact, even getting rid of certain viruses and things like that, or even installation of printer drivers and simple things, users did that themselves. We used to train them. And so the whole part of the reason that people fall into the traps is because we have dumbed down their use of the machine. So they are lulled into thinking, okay, I don't have administrator access. I don't have much access to this. So therefore, if I click on this and click on that, it shouldn't cause any harm, right? We have not empowered them. We haven't trained them. But we, instead of holding on to that knowledge and power, we spent hours in training the people. As a matter of fact, I always, in every organization that I ran, we used to have what I used to call local area network coordinators. Today, we would call them cybersecurity champions. You probably heard that concept in my book, which is that I believe for every business unit group that is functional group, 15 member, 25 member, whatever, have somebody who is a designated super user of that group. They would know the group environment, they would know what technologies and what information, what data that group uses, and then make them power users. And then we would train them, they in turn could train their people, and that way you could easily train, it doesn't matter how big the organization is. So I don't know if you heard some of the videos where I talk about my nuclear power plant experience. We had 2,500 users in a very, very complex environment, and I needed to train them in all the technology that we were implementing. Well, I only had 2 people, so three of us. How could we train 2,500 people? Well, we created an army of 100 local area network coordinators. We trained those 100 people, each trained about 25, and that's how we got the 2,500 people trained. And then it was continuous training. We would keep bringing those 100 people back every month, and we would train them more, and they would go back and train their people. And this created an amazing trusting relationship between the community and the technology department. And that also created a huge amount of goodwill. So in the nuclear power plant, there even used to be team of the month and like employee of the year kinds of awards. A member of my team actually won employee of the year award, which was voted by members of the nuclear power plant, which was unheard of. But actually we were in a great situation to meet with everybody, right? So if we did our job right, it was very easy for us to become very popular. Right? Because empowering people, teaching people, helping them become better, there's nothing better than that, right? So if you do that to your people, they're going to reward you with their love. And that is what also happens even in education. When a passionate professor teaches their students properly and they really take care of the student's success, guess what? The student returns that back with a lot of love and affiliation. And you can't buy that with money, right? That love has to be created. So it's the same thing. If I'm supporting an organization, I can create that love with all my users. So there hasn't been a single company where I've worked where I didn't make it my job to make everybody around me successful. Everybody around me, whatever I could do to make anybody around me successful, that's what I always did. And that culture can be a very powerful culture in any organization. So if you believe that, that's what you do. And you start with your own team.
I appreciate your tips on building community and culture within the workforce. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for that, Dr. Hasib.
Absolutely.
And like I said, you'll be hearing from me soon about touching base with
speaking
you
and
about
leadership. Absolutely. So this will be absolutely wonderful because our club is now global. We are having all these meetings on this kind of a platform, and we didn't miss a beat. So many of the other clubs stopped as soon as COVID hit. Our club never stopped. We just went on, and that's it.
Yeah, I was very impressed with how seamless everything was the time that I visited. So I'm really looking forward to all of this.
That is good. All right. Well, fantastic catching up with you, Angelina. So I look forward to seeing you perhaps in the next Toastmasters meeting, which will be on July the 7th evening.
Okay, I will see you there.
So do you have any other questions? Because you still have about 3 minutes left.
Oh, 3 minutes. I think that's it.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for coming. And I'm going to stop the recording now.
Thank you.
Take care.